Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to a special service in honor of John William Payzant. My name is Chris Ivney. I'm the lead pastor here at Rock Church, and it's our privilege to play a small part in us gathering to celebrate a life well lived, a life that impacted so many. Of course, his family, his great big family, are feeling the impacts today, but a community feels the impact as well. I think I recognize so many of you, but my ability to recognize people through only their eyes is getting better, sadly. But I think that perhaps many of us are well known to one another. And so as we gather today here and as those watch online, I'm just going to encourage you. Just as difficult as it may seem to hear these words, enjoy the moment. Enjoy this moment that we get to share together. Enjoy this moment that we get to celebrate Mr. Payzant, who meant so much and impacted so many of our lives. And whatever happens today, if you feel the emotions to cry, I encourage you, just lean into it. If things happen and things are said that are comical, it's okay to laugh. This is an okay space to experience all of those things because I believe it's all a part of the process. It's a little bit of the way God made us to deal with some of these things. And so as we do that today and as we honor his life, I'm believing for God to be here with us and to help us. And so with that in mind, if I could, I'd like to just open us up in a moment of prayer. Amen? Let me pray. Hallelujah, Lord. Father God, we thank you for this opportunity to gather as a community, to gather as a family, to gather, Lord God, as those that were impacted so deeply through a life well lived in our community, a true leader in our community, a true pioneer in our community. And so as we honor him today, I pray that you would allow us to feel your presence, to feel your peace, to feel your joy, that you would help us and comfort us. Specifically, I think of the family today as well, that they would truly know how much you love them and that they would get a sense of how much you love their dad, how much you love their grandfather, and how much you loved our friend and fellow community leader here in Sackville. So we thank you for this. We just look forward to what you're going to do in this moment. We prayed in Jesus' name. Everybody said, amen. Well, we're going to start this off right today. I had the privilege of working at Payzant's Home Hardware for a few years through the late 90s to about the year 2000. Had some interactions with Mr. Payzant, had much more with his sons and extended family, and many of you as we were co-workers together. And so I've got a lot of fond memories. I'll share a few of those today. But we wanted to take some time to celebrate in song as well. So I'm going to ask Jason and Edith and Amanda to join me on stage here, and they're going to share a little bit. And following that, we're going to have a few tributes about how Mr. Payzant meant to all of us.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jason. This is my wife, Itzit, and sister Amanda. John Payzant is our grandfather. My mother was his favorite daughter. We're going to sing a song called The Cows Aren't Coming Home by Kelly Trottier. Mom heard this song a while ago, and the words really made her think of her father. Many of you know Granddad absolutely loved the farm where he grew up, and he spent as much time there as he possibly could. We believe that this song is particularly fitting at this point in time, and his family can all relate as you listen to the words and picture the farm.
stands overlooking this field, this story undone. It was all that he'd known from the time he was young. Years of family tradition he built upon, on the heels of his father, on my granddad's farm. He grew like the crops in the field with the sun and the rain. The seeds planted early for each generation again. No interest in college, he knew where he wanted to be. Home on the farm with the wife and his own family. But now the hills are lying empty. There's a hole where his heart used to be. There's a crippled old fence in the field with nothing to see. Oh, the hills are lying empty. The grass is overgrown. He knew this day would come like the seasons. The cows aren't coming home. A few inches shorter with just a white whisper of hair. Too much on the farm, now in need of repair. The cattle are loaded, one last caravan, and he's left with acres of memories and hard work in his hands. All is not lost just down the road. There are hands prepared to take hold of the dream. Now the hills are lying empty. There's a hole where his heart used to be. There's a crippled old fence in the field, nothing to see. Oh, the hills are lying empty. The grass is overgrown. He knew this day would come like the seasons. The cows aren't coming home. Now the hills are lying empty. The grass is overgrown. He knew this day would come like the seasons. The cows aren't coming home.
Oh, thank you so much. You're allowed to clap here. It's okay. Mr. Payzant would be clapping. It's his grandkids. Come on. I'll tell you one Mr. Payzant story, one of my many, before we have Linda Heffler come. I was working on the order desk one stormy old night, and because it was a stormy night, very few customers were in. Actually, it wasn't even night. It was coming on to late afternoon. And so I didn't want to stand idle because I was the youngest guy on the order desk, and I felt if anyone was going to be picked out for not working, it would be the new guy. So I figured, you know what? I'm going to head over to the nail tree, if you guys know what that is, where I still feel like I'm there, sell nails by the pound. Of course, things would fall to the ground. So I decided I was going to go sweep. Well, Mr. Payzant came down, and he was waiting for Donnie McCory to get off the phone, because Donnie was always on the phone. And as he was waiting, I felt him watch me sweep. And mind you, I was the only one working, I feel, in this moment. Everyone else was just standing around waiting for customers. Well, I had the dustpan in one hand and the broom in the other. And so I was sweeping, and I'd scoop up some and throw it out and sweep and scoop. Well, Mr. Payzant watched me probably as long as he could take it. He came over and he said, "Here, let me show you something." And he took the broom from me because I only had it in one hand, and he put his two hands on it, and he began to sweep so fast and so vigorously. Before I knew it, nails were pinging down every aisle. And he said, "There you go, that's how you sweep." So I didn't know what to say, and I knew everyone at the order desk was staring at me. So I just said, "Thank you, Mr. Payzant." And all I heard from the order desk was a bunch of snickers because I got shown. And he looked back, and Donnie was still on the phone, so we went upstairs, presumably to his office. After Donnie got off the phone in a couple of minutes, he came over and he said, "What was that about?" And I said, "Mr. Payzant was just showing me the proper way to sweep." He said, I thought he was teaching you how to curl. You know the guys that sweep? But Mr. Payzant was a two-hand on the broom kind of guy. If you're going to work, put everything you have to it. So that's one of my fond memories of both Mr. Payzant and Donnie McQuarrie. At this time, I'm going to ask Linda Heffler to come and to bring some community greetings.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully it doesn't get in my earring.
You'll do good, and I'll help you with this.
Just down a bit. That'll be good. So I'm not a speechwriter, and so here goes nothing. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to begin with my heartfelt condolences to all of you, John's family, his sons, daughter, spouses, grandchildren, and 8 grandchildren. I was amazed in the obituary. 16 grandchildren and 22 great-grandchildren. That is awesome. And never mind the business legacy, you are his family legacy. And your father and grandfather was very special to each of you. However, he was also a very special man to the community of Sackville. When Jeff called last week and asked if I would speak today on behalf of the community, I was both honored and humbled to speak about the man who not only literally helped build this great community, but supported it well beyond any business in Sackville. After reading John's obituary, I was left thinking, what else can I say? That was a great tribute. You did summarize his life beautifully. So let me go a little deeper into his community legacy. I've known John all my life, first through my parents coming into the store and doing business, and later through my volunteer work in Sackville. I've actually served on a couple of the same groups as John, just different time periods. Over the past 20 years, our connection has been with Acadia Hall in Lower Sackville. When our members decided to redevelop our land from unused ball fields into a beautiful community park, Payzant's became our biggest supporter. John donated so many things to us, and his help was invaluable. From the gazebo on the hills, to the trees around the perimeter of the big circle, the replacement of the rink boards that were stolen, to a utility shed for the new community garden. It still leaves me in awe. And by the way, he was also a member of the Acadia Recreation Club. His support to us was amazing, and over the past few years, I've been educated on how truly supportive John was, not only to various groups, but also to many individuals. While either working around the park or taking individuals around the park to see what potential donations might look like for them, we will naturally come to a multitude of donations with the Payzant name on it. And then out come the stories. You talked about his kindness and generosity with the families coming into the community, and where they extended the credit to them that others wouldn't. Well, their stories go a little deeper than just that. Some go like this. You know, John gave me credit to build my house. There were times I couldn't make my monthly payment. John would just say, you'll catch up. They continue to say that. Because John believed in them and trusted them that they would pay it back. And they didn't want to break that trust. They've told me further that they feel they are better persons today because of the faith and trust that John had in them back in the day. And they continue to have admiration for him over the years. In fact, I don't think I've ever heard anyone say a single bad word about John Payzant. Another common group that John and I were members of is Lake District Recreation Association. Again, different time periods. The group owns and operates the Sackville Arena and the Leisure Center on First Lake Drive. But one of their big community events that they host is the Sackville Volunteer Appreciation Evening, where the community groups, sports teams, and nonprofits are invited to come and honor one of their many volunteers at a dinner. So I approached Bob Rhines, the president of LDRA, to float an idea past him. Now, I don't know about all of you, but I've not only volunteered my time on committees, but I've also been a big fundraiser. And like so many others, we go out and we need auction items, ticket sales, or in my case, rubber duck sales. Everyone goes to the businesses in Sackville first. And the first business that they go to, and the first business I would go to, would be Payzant's, because John never said no to supporting the community. So Bob and I created the Payzant Award. This was presented to John and Jeff in person at the volunteer dinner in 2018, where representatives of many of the groups who regularly approach Payzant's for support were seated in one room and could collectively honor and applaud the commitment of John and the family have shown to us over the years. The plaque on that award reads, "Presented to a Sackville-based business who has demonstrated strong community commitment through years of financial and gift donations supporting local charities, service organizations, sports teams, and events." Now, I'm not sure if Jeff told him why he was going to the dinner that night, but at least he did appear to be very surprised and honored at the presentation. The award is now with the Sackville Business Association and is one which has to be earned by a business. And Payzant's have created tremendously big shoes for any other business in this community to try and fill. John was not boastful. He was not arrogant. He was not unapproachable. John was a gentleman who exhibited great kindness to all. He was a community leader and builder who loved and supported his Sackville. We, the community of Sackville, love John and thank him for everything he has given to this community, his service, his commitment, and his passion. Rest in peace, John.
Oh, thank you so much, Linda. Yeah, the Bible says that in Proverbs, a good man leaves a legacy for those that come after him. And Mr. Payzant has left a legacy certainly for his family to follow, but for many of us in the community. In fact, in that way, Mr. Payzant was a bridge builder of sorts. There's probably not a house in Sackville that doesn't have some piece of Payzant's Home Hardware in it somewhere. In the walls, I know for me, I had to replace a bathroom fitting, and I actually figured it out. For those that work with me, it was a miracle, but I actually figured it out. But one of the things I loved the most was whoever put it on the first time left a sticker on it. I knew the product number, I knew everything. I also know how much prices have changed in 30 years too. But that's the legacy that Mr. Payzant leaves behind, and it's a legacy that continues. For the hundreds of us that had part-time and full-time employment over those years, and that made a way for us. I mean, it's truly amazing. I wasn't, because I was one of many people that worked at Payzant's over the years, I wasn't entirely sure if Mr. Payzant actually knew my name, right? Because and at that time, everyone that worked there doing stock and all that kind of stuff, we all kind of looked the same. It was just one of those strange things. At the time, I had blonder hair. We were all skinny, scrawny kids running around. And one day I was walking through the store on my way. Actually, I was on my way to where Andrew was. Andrew was just about ready to get me to do something. And as I walked by, Mr. Payzant was walking the opposite way. And he looked over at me and he smiled. And he said, "Hey, Chris, how's your day going?" I said, "Oh, it's going good. How's your day?" He said, "Oh, good." And he just blew by. Well, it lifted my spirits, and I must have had a big greasy grin on my face, because by the time I made it to Andrew, he said, "What are you smiling at?" I said, Mr. Payzant just walked by, and he asked me if I was having a good day, but he called me by name, and I said I wasn't even sure he knew my name. And Andrew just looked at me, and then he had a greasy smile and said, "You know your name's on your shirt, right?" So, Andrew has a way of keeping your feet on the ground. But a legacy has absolutely been left. You know, Mr. Payzant was a bridge builder in our community, and it reminds me of a poem that's actually entitled Bridge Builder that I'll read for you now, just as we take a moment for some more tributes to come. It says this: "An old man going a lone highway came at evening cold and gray to a chasm vast and deep and wide, through which there was flowing a sullen tide. The old man crossed in twilight dim. The sullen stream had no fear for him, but he turned when safe on the other side to build a bridge to span the tide. Old man, a fellow pilgrim near, said, 'Why are you wasting your strength with building here? Your journey will end with ending day. You never again will pass this way. You've crossed the chasm deep and wide. Why build this bridge at evening tide?' The builder lifted his gray old head. 'Good friend, in path I have come,' he said, 'but there follow after me today a youth whose feet must pass this way. This chasm has been not to me, but to that fair-haired youth a pitfall might be. He too must cross in twilight dim. Good friend, I'm building this bridge for him.'" And I feel, if anything captured the life of Mr. Payzant, it was that. It was those conversations when you couldn't quite pay your bill on that month. And he said, "It's okay." And he helped you bridge that gap one more time. Of the many people, sadly, over the years that tried businesses and failed and left outstanding accounts at Payzant's. And Mr. Payzant, and I know for a fact, would never avoid them. See them in the store, go over, make a point to speak to them, made sure that they knew everything was okay. That's a good man leaving a legacy. It really is. Because it wasn't just about business, as great as that business is that has stood the test of time. It was about people. It was about community. It was about something bigger than himself. And I think that's something that will carry on through, certainly in his family, but I hope in this community as well. I hope through us that got to experience a piece of that in our interactions with him and how much he meant for us as well. With that in mind, I'm going to call to the stage a few more tributes, and I'm just going to encourage you. You don't all have to come up together, but you can come up one after the other. I'm going to ask Amanda, and then Jason, and then Sarah, and then Elizabeth to come one after the other as they have some words to share about the life of John William Payzant. Lord bless you as you do.
Greetings. Granddad. A word that comes to mind is consistent. Consistent in all that he did. Careful thought and follow through. He was consistent in time spent listening, caring and sharing. Consistently generous. Unwaveringly generous with his time and just showing up. Generous with his money and with all that he had. Consistent in wisdom. He would give you the answer which was the right answer, not always the one that you wanted to hear. Consistent in pride, and not the bad kind of pride. He was proud of his family, his grandchildren, and his great-grandchildren. He was the very best role model in the area of work ethic. He was there. He was always there. a very present man, working long hours at the store, building that business up from the ground. And I can't think of a better example of good customer service than he. He was everywhere you needed him to be. And he was consistently stubborn. Talk about frugality. You couldn't get that man to get a new bed, a new coach, a new anything. So here's a little story with a play-by-play. As I go in for a little visit in his office, this happened to be on July 11th, 2019. Hi, Mandy. What brings you in today? Well, I'm thinking about updating my kitchen countertop, and I'm just looking at the sample colors that you have down there. What's wrong with the one you have? Well, it's old and dated, and it's starting to chip in different areas. Does it still work? Well, yes, it still works. But Granddad, you have a home improvement store. If everyone thought like that and they never renovated their home, then you'd be out of a business real quick. And he looks up with me and a chuckle. Good point.
How much time have I got? There's a lot of stories to tell about Granddad. It was a warm, sunny day at the farm. Granddad came putting up on his four-wheeler. You'd see him starting at Andrews. He'd drive down the road to Jim's, cross the field over to Jeff's, then up the field to the farmhouse where we would all be. Each place stopping in, see how everybody's doing, have a chat, drop off some local goodies that he got at a business earlier. This happened every weekend. This is where he loved to be. He loved it when we were all there. So this particular day, Granddad arrives, and he comes up on the patio at the farmhouse. I was all proud of myself, because I had been successful at making my first batch of beer. He wanted to try some, and he was intrigued as the steps that I used to make it. So as I poured, I was explaining the complexities of timing and temperature. I told him that after it's fermented, you can carbonate it with a CO2 tank. Huh, he says. When I used to make beer, I used to bottle it and shove it in a manure pile. They were tough back then. Granddad lived life on his own terms. He was strong and steady. He never put on any show. He had work ethic. He treated you with respect no matter who you were or where you came from. He was true to his word. He was humble and generous. He was a doer, not just a talker. He showed love for you through his actions. He was easy to talk to, and we would have real conversations about things. Everything from sales to business and stocks to old school ways of the farm like canning or how to gut a turkey. We talked about successes and failures. He would tell the story about the time he grew a field of potatoes and then sold them. But then after these potatoes were sold, he realized that they had blight and they rotted and took out all the other potatoes in storage. So maybe that's why he moved towards selling building supplies instead of fruits and vegetables. Granddad showed empathy toward others. When we talked about a subject where there might be a difference of opinion, which happened periodically, there's more sanitary ways to make beer. He would always take the time to mull it over and see things from your perspective. We can see his fingerprints on so much of our daily lives. And because of all the virtues that he personified, he is a role model that we should continually strive to replicate. He's left a great legacy that will go on through us. And each time we drive by the store or pass by where his office was, or find ourselves on Shore Drive looking out into the basin, or each trip around the field at the farm in an old school tractor, let it serve as a reminder of how fortunate we were to have been part of his life. And his memory will live on until the day that we're all together again.
Hi, I'm Sarah, and I have a few things to share. There's nothing more precious in life than relationship. Nothing more profoundly beautiful than the people in our lives that surround us and build into us heart and soul. Granddad was unmistakably that kind of builder. His gentle spirit and steadfast availability were so solid. For me, that offered such peace and security. And from that foundation of stability, I grew, surrounded by the framework of family and rootedness that was so valuable to him. I'm so grateful that I was gifted this man as my granddad. His ear was always open, and also his arms. My earliest memories of Granddad are being curled up on his lap while he smoked a cigarette. And oh, how I loved the smell and how it would linger long after, because it reminded me of him and the warmth and safety of being snuggled in his arms. Even still, I knew intuitively that smoking was not so good for him, and I wanted him to be safe too. One of the very first notes I ever wrote was to Granddad, and it read, "Don't smoke, it'll make you choke." And because it wasn't too much later that he did actually quit, I claimed a margin of credit for that. Even though I secretly still don't mind the smell of cigarette smoke. Don't tell anyone. As a little girl, I have such wonderful memories of his store, woven into the fabric of my being. I loved arriving there and going straight up to where I knew I'd find Granddad. Up the stairs, down the narrow paneled hall, and into his office where he usually sat at his desk behind the neatly piled stacks of letters and papers and files. What a perfectly fascinating place it was. Up on his knee, I would attack the buttons on his big calculator, which is right there, and he never, ever seemed to mind. I was always welcome. And he would unfailingly dig into his pocket of change and put a quarter into my little hand for my choice of jelly beans or barbecue peanuts from the dispenser downstairs. And off I'd run. While many of you all here can attest to Granddad's impeccable intuition in all things business, I did learn from him the value of appreciating and supporting local. Something that he did so naturally and authentically, long before it was a hip thing to do. Farm markets and small businesses across the province knew they had a loyal customer in John Payzant. I loved going on little road trips with him because it often included a stop at a farm market and the anticipation of an ice cream cone. I just love how Granddad so appreciated the little things. He never was one to be chasing after the finer things in life, but instead chose to focus on the greater things, the small details that he would pause to really enjoy. He found joy in the moments and perceived beauty even in the broken. These were the truest, finer things. Granddad saw value where others didn't. He saw the nail that could be straightened, and he saw the life that could use a friend. He saw the second piece of cheesecake with a twinkle in his eye, and that he could hang a bag full of Reed's meats on a doorknob as he passed by, just because it was good to give. And he followed through. He saw the value of rich community, and we are the ones who get to reap the rewards of the generosity that has characterized his life. Granddad built strong community wherever he went. He invested deeply in people, and he listened so very well. His true caring of others manifested in the way he listened and gave his attention so fully. I am mind blown by how well he did this. Granddad had leadership skills that many marvel over. I know he would often say to me he was just in the right place at the right time, but we all know it was far more than that. Granddad had a servant's heart. I know that he was a good leader because he knew how to serve so well. In humility, he brought people together, edifying others and hearing their stories. Really hearing. Granddad loved a good story. He appreciated literature and poetry and valued a photo, a note. Nothing was overlooked. In my experience, Granddad was not a man of many words. He listened far more than he spoke. But when he did share, he spoke no ill word of anyone, ever. His talk was free from negative tones. He never, ever, ever complained. He held no grudges. Rather, he truly exemplified grace and strength through his genuine nature of kindness. As a granddaughter, I don't remember a harsh or unkind word ever uttered in my direction, even off the cuff. Except I will share the one time that I accidentally revved a little dirt bike into the side of his car, and he said, "Someone go throw that thing in the river." I once asked Granddad, after all the world traveling he had done, would he want to live anywhere else? He said no. He loved Nova Scotia because he enjoyed the way the seasons changed. Today I celebrate and I'm so thankful that he saw more of those trips around the sun than the average guy. But Granddad was far from the average kind of man. He infused himself into the hearts of all of us in all his 90 years. The month before Granddad went into the hospital, I was able to spend weekends with him and often my family as well. We have always loved sleepovers at Granddad's house. It was such a gift of time, and we sat and enjoyed each other's company, asking him lots of questions and him telling us stories of his life. The kids always loved playing Dr. Mario with Granddad, and he was very good at that game. I honestly don't know how he dropped those little pills into place so fast, but he seemed to just intuitively know what was coming and how to navigate. He was good at seeing the big picture. I do believe that Eva, his great-granddaughter, and he had the last game together that he ever played. I watched him as he lost on purpose. And they looked at each other, and he said with a twinkle, "You beat me." You don't always get to perceive last things. The last drive to the farm from Bedford, I took him the back way through Windsor. I don't really know why I did that, but it seemed right. He was quiet, but he pointed out the building where he had his first job, at the furniture store. He was still a teenager. The season has changed. A quiet winter of sadness has me missing a great man who was like no other. A man who embodied humility and grace. A man who has left a massive legacy. But just as I know he loved how the seasons change, I know he would want us all to grow closer, emerging when the time is just right from the dormancy of grief into the spring of new chapters, with our eyes wide open towards each other. And in so doing, may we be well rooted in the soils of authentic relationship that Granddad so nurtured for us. I have a poem to share that I did not write, but first I need Kleenex, which I didn't bring up with me. I do like writing poetry, and I tried to write a poem, but just, sometimes things don't come like you think when you want them to. But on my way here, I answered an email from Catherine, and Catherine was a lady who stayed with Granddad for a little while in these last few months of his life. And she sent this poem to me that she had written, and I didn't ask her if I could share it, so I hope it's okay, Catherine. But I think it's very appropriate. It's called Gentleman. In May of 2020, I started to work for a man named John. I had been told he was a gentleman, and those words were never proven wrong. From the time he rose in the morning till he laid his head to rest, I was treated like a lifelong friend, not an employee. Boy, I was blessed. I was honored to have met him and blessed to watch his ways of treating everyone with utmost respect, no matter the time or day. You see, John saw the good in all. At times, I'm sure that was a test. But he made sure the part he saw was what we often choose to miss. I would watch as his family would visit and see their faces all aglow with nothing but love and admiration of the gentleman I came to know. They would sit, kneel, hug, and laugh, and talk with him for hours, appreciating every second they got, the memories they longed to devour. There were times I would look in on him and watch as he stared out the basin. Not a wrinkle or worry on his face, just contentment and appreciation. I know your hearts must be heavy, but memories we must continue to tell of the gentleman we came to know and love, who for now we must say farewell. But I have made myself a promise to learn from what he possessed, to be kind and speak no ill of others. That's the legacy to me he left. John, Until we meet again, Catherine. Thank you.
I think you'll find a common thread in a lot of our comments today. We didn't coordinate what we were going to say, but the words are still the same for all of us. My father, John Payzant, was a great man. Dad's greatness was not in material possessions, but in all of the things that really matter. My dad loved his family more than anything in this life. He was never too busy or too tired to visit with us or take our calls. He always stopped everything and turned his attention to us for any reason. This same love was extended to his friends and even acquaintances. His friendships were never taken for granted, and I don't think I ever heard him say a negative word about anyone. He was kind and generous, always willing to lend a helping hand if there was a need that he could fill. Let me try and tell you a little bit more about my dad. My husband Bob and I are blessed to live in the home in which he was raised, in Bishopville. Bishopville is a little place that I'd like to tell you a little bit more about in case you don't know. It's a very special place because it was Dad's favorite place on earth and the place that holds our deepest roots. As children, my brothers and I spent countless days visiting our Graham and Uncle Clyde on the farm, growing, learning, and enjoying our family connections. Bishopville is a tiny pinpoint on the map, yet so very large to us all. There, in the quiet and the stillness allows one to truly breathe. The gentle rolling fields, the woods, the pasture, the river, the sky, the little country church, the singing birds, and all of the memories draw us back. Memories of Dad and his brother Clyde gathering the hay, working in the tiny sawmill, caring for the cows, and mixing cement for the well crock my uncle would sell. Many think of my dad as a Sackville man, and he was, very much so. He cared about his community deeply and worked hard to help build it. But Bishopville had his heart. Even just a few short weeks ago, he pointed his car to the valley at least once a week. I know we all loved to see him coming along the field on his four-wheeler, making the rounds, to stop by my brother's cottages along the river and to see us at the old farmhouse. He always came, with offerings of fresh strawberries or apples, peaches or pears, or whatever was in season at the time. Because of Dad, my brothers and I and our families have this rich heritage of love to carry on, and I will forever be grateful to him for that. Our hope is to pass this heritage on to our children and theirs, which I know is what Dad would want. This is going to be the hard part for me. A few years ago, I wrote Dad a letter, and I will share parts of that with you today because it truly summarizes my thoughts about him. Dear Dad, it's Father's Day, and because I know you don't want us buying you presents, I decided to write you this letter. I have to be able to see it now. I want you to know that you are and always have been a wonderful father. You are always there when I need you. You give and keep on giving, never expecting anything in return. The biggest thing that you have given is your love in your deep and quiet way. You show that love in so many ways. It shows in your eyes when they go all soft as you watch your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren play, or in a gentle touch on my shoulder. Sometimes when I drive by the store, I look up at your little window and see you sitting there behind your desk. I'm comforted by your presence there. You've worked so hard all these years to build up the business which you so generously share with us, your children. You have earned the respect of your peers and your community. Your generosity is wide. You are a devoted, loving grandfather and great-grandfather, and the children all love you very much. When I was a little girl, you always made me feel special. I don't ever remember hearing a cross word from you towards me, although I'm sure I deserved many. Your concern for me is always apparent in everything you do. Mom used to say, I had you wrapped around my finger, but really you are wrapped around my heart. I love you more than words can possibly say. You are my dad, and I couldn't be more proud of you or love you more. I will always be your little girl. Love forever, Elizabeth, also known as Little Bit. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you, everyone. Before we have a few more tributes, we thought it would be a good idea to just have a moment of song. It'll be led on the screen behind me. We want to honor Mr. Payzant today, and if I try to lead you in song, it's not going to have that vibe, I promise you, and you won't be able to follow. So we're going to sing together, but before we do that, one more very short Mr. Payzant story. After the winter and all the snow melts, you guys know every parking lot's full of dust and dirt and the rest of it. So me and a couple of the guys were out sweeping the parking lot next door at the store, and while we were doing it, Mr. Payzant pulled in, and I don't know what transpired. He was at the time driving a big old Crown Vic, and I think as he got close to the building, he reached down to grab something, or with that Crown Vic, who knows, you could put a Crown Vic in park, and it's still going to roll ahead. The distance between park and stop is like 4 inches at the best of times. And it rolled ever so slightly and touched the building, enough for us to notice it. Mr. Payzant got out, looked at the car, and looked at us, and we were just kind of stood there in frozen silence. He said, now which one of you boys moved that building? Before we were smart enough to answer, he was gone. So that's one more. Well, at this time, we're going to just sing a familiar hymn, I think, to many of us. It's Amazing Grace. I'm going to encourage you, if you're able to stand, the family can remain seated if they choose to, but it's just a great moment for us to acknowledge the Lord, and so we're going to sing that together. Thank you.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was Through many dangers, toils, and snares, we have already come. 'Twas grace that brought us safe thus far, and grace will lead us home. And grace will lead us home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, with no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. 'Twas blind, but now I see.
Thank you so much. At this time, we're going to have some more of the family speak. I'm going to ask Darren, and then Mark, and then Matthew, and then Jeff to come and speak. Lord bless you as you do.
I should keep this on. It doubles as a tear catcher. This is the first time I've ever spoken at a funeral, so bear with me if I stumble a bit. When first asked if I would like to take a few words and talk about Granddad, I was like, whoa, I can't do that. And then I was like, well, it's Granddad. I can't not do that. So I thought, what can I say? What can I do? And I thought, words. How about I put together a small list of words that I've heard used to describe my granddad? So I just put together a few that I'd like to share with you. It's a small list. While yes, it's true, this list could be twice the length. For me, there's one word, and it's humble. Humble in business, humble in family, and humble in life. He treated everyone with dignity and respect, and he would, like Sarah said, would be the first one to chalk up his success to right place and the right time. And while that may be a small ingredient, Granddad would have succeeded at whatever he set his mind to. I learned so much, and not necessarily by what he said, but by what he did. 49 years ago today, on a stormy February morning, I came into this world and turned Mr. John Payzant into Granddad. Since that day, I have so many wonderful memories, stories, and lessons learned, too many to count. However, I would like to take a few moments to share a few with all of you. I remember he came to the camp in New Brunswick one time, and we had an old pellet gun, and I didn't have any pellets, so we had BBs. So I would take the gun and pump it up, and I'd have to put the BB in the end. And I said, well, Granddad, every time I aim it, it falls out the end. And he says, well, why don't you go get us a bird for dinner? That way it will stay in. So I said, okay. So I went out, and I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 minutes later, I came back in and I said, "Granddad, I got one." And he Granddad being Granddad, he said, "Well, Darren, that's fabulous." But Dad said, "You know, that's a Camp Jay. Those are rare." Oh, sorry. I remember, excuse me, being in Five Islands and camping. And we would always go out on the mud, and every now and then we would get stuck. Well, Granddad was there to come and get me out of the mud and carry me back on his shoulders. And I remember saying, "But Granddad, my boots." And he says, "Oh, Darren, forget about those. We'll get you some new ones." And I remember him teaching me how to eat oysters. And some of you may have read on Facebook when he would say, "You just let them slide down." And I still never really got the knack of it. And I remember Matt came up to the store one day in New Brunswick, and it was a Saturday. And Granddad just happened to show up, as he often did. And he was so proud that Matthew and I were working on a Saturday. Matthew came all the way up from Lower Sackville, and I was in on a Saturday. And it makes me feel proud that he would recognize that we all try to follow in his footsteps. And my last story is, I was a little boy and always played down by the pool, and Granddad was laying by the pool, sun tanning, I guess. He had his beige shorts and a straw hat and his sunglasses on with a good book, and he was watching us at the pool. And I remember we had snorkel, and I was going to go up and get him with some water. So I got the snorkel full of water, and I'm trying to creep up on him, and I couldn't see his eyes, and then all of a sudden, he went, "Boom!" And he scared me, and I fell back into the pool, and I've never heard him laugh so hard, and just right from the belly. And I got up and got out, and I said, "Good one, Granddad," and he was still laughing. So he knew me. He was ready. My last memory with Granddad was shortly before Christmas this year, and we had a lobster feast with Mom, Liz, and Bob. And oh, how he loved lobster. And I'm just thankful that I had that time with him. While I could go on and on talking about my Granddad and what he meant to me, I shall leave you with this. Granddad, you will be dearly missed. You meant so much to so many people. But to me, you were and always will be Granddad. I will cherish forever the memories, and am forever grateful for all that you have done for our family. Say hi to Tara, Grandmom, Graham, and Clyde for me. I will try my best to make you proud.
As many people have shared already, Granddad was such a wonderful man, and a neighbor of mine. I just happen to have the privilege of living in one of the communities that I'm sure my father and my uncles have delivered some of the materials to the home that I currently live in. And one of my neighbors, he had one of those personal stories of dealing with Granddad when he built his home, and he was almost in tears when he came to my door when he had heard the news. He was so that's just an example that, Granddad just made such an impact on so many people. And every time you go up to his office, the chair would go back, the freezer would open, and bread or something out of the freezer, something for the grandkids. and or the great grandkids, and he just loved it. And as Aunt Liz said, driving by every evening, you'd see him in his office. His head was down, looking at his computer screen. Some days he was a little happier than others, but he was just always there, and you were just so happy. And heard a story just read a card today about some of the interactions and some staff at the end of the day. You know, maybe their parents were late picking them up, and Granddad would stay to make sure that they were safely picked up. And he just cared deeply for everyone. So I did just want to share a verse about Granddad. Proverbs 3, verse 5 to 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. And Granddad, he truly did show us how to just focus on family and, just how to love and care for one another. Thank you.
I've been reciting those three names, Darren, Mark, Matt, Jeff. Darren, Mark, Matt, Jeff. So I got my position straight. Well, I knew there would be lots of tributes, so I didn't know if I needed to say anything, but I thought I could bring a perspective. Obviously, Granddad was first and foremost my grandfather. But for the past 15 years, I know it's been 15 years, Andrew would say last week, I've had the privilege of getting to know him in a different light at work. For the first 10 years or so that I was there, that involved a lot of requests from him to fix the computer, maybe phone calls about road salt, sonotube, fertilizer, naturally Nancy's hand cream, topsoil pool salt, and the price of water conditioning salt, to name a few. In fact, I was in Walmart the other day, and didn't I take a picture of the pallet with the price, thinking there's going to be a quiz on this someday. Granddad would always wonder, how are they buying it or selling it for that price? But as I worked around the store and around the office, especially the last few years, I was able to catch glimpses of Granddad's character at work. And I saw how he quietly invested in the lives of customers and people that have worked with him for many years. Some people called him boss, some called him sir, many called him Mr. P. And since last Tuesday, when we got the news, I've really enjoyed hearing stories of how he impacted the lives of people that work for him. Many people took effort, customers, vendors, staff, people I have no idea who they are, found somebody in the store to go and say, hey, you're a Payzant, I just want to tell you a story. And it was great. But when I was talking to some staff, I learned a few things about Granddad. Number one, I learned that he was a dealer of dults and many other items that people mentioned. But there's more than one staff at the store wondering, where am I going to get my dults? So he was a dealer. Anyways, I learned that he was a great listener. Several people reflected how time sometimes slipped away as they sat in his office talking. It might have been the heat. It was always warm in there. But he always had time to listen. I learned that Granddad was thoughtful when people were sick or were hurting. Just a few years ago, he traveled into the hospital to visit with Walter after he had a heart attack. I'm thinking a few years ago, that's 88 years old. And no doubt after work, he would have driven in to visit with Walter to see how he was doing. And when a longtime customer of ours had lost a loved one, he said how Granddad would call him periodically just to see how he was doing. Now, chances are he needed something fixed as well. And Granddad was always conscientious to return phone calls. Little, big, he would always return a call. I learned that Granddad loved to give advice. Wendell's here. I was talking to Wendell the other day, and he had some stories. Some of them I wasn't going to share. Some of them I thought I could. But no doubt in the room, there's many stories of different colors. But Wendell told me about a story when he was in his early 20s. He was called up to the office. And if you know Wendell, he was probably a little nervous. But he's called up to the office, and he really wondered, what am I being called up here for? So he sat down, and Granddad said, so I hear you won some money recently at the track at Sackville Downs. You won $2,000 on horse racing. Wendell said, yes. And Granddad said, so what are you going to do with the money? He said, well, I don't know. So Granddad took some time to try to explain how investing could work, a little bit about the stock market. Wendell's thinking, I don't even have a bank account. But after that, he went and got a savings account at the Bank of Montreal. So Granddad was always willing to give advice. I learned that Granddad trusted his team when he needed help. Again, Walter remembers Granddad asking him to drive to Lunenburg with spare keys to rescue Liz and Grandma because they locked the keys in the car. And I'm sure more than one person in this room has been on some sort of rescue mission to retrieve equipment, a vehicle, Granddad himself somewhere. But he always trusted his team to get things done. Barb had a story where they were setting up a booth down at the Windsor exhibition. And Grandma at the time says, well, John, we can't get there until you bring the trailer down. We're going to be dancing. I asked Barb, who was working? She says, well, I was working. Your grandmother was there for the dance. But Granddad got in the car, brought the trailer down so that they were all set up. I learned that Granddad didn't care much for meetings. I'm pretty sure I heard the story where they had one meeting, there was a bit of a disagreement, and it was the first and the last. Never had a meeting. Since then, I've watched his eye as he walks through the room looking at meetings, wondering, what are they talking about? I learned that Granddad was very clear about his opinions. A cab over Hino truck was a good thing, despite maybe a lot of opinions otherwise. And all pickup trucks should have wooden side rails to help carry drain tile. I'm sure the plow truck had rails on, off, on, off, on, off. And if they were gone, he made sure, I need someone to build me some new ones. I learned that Granddad was generous, sometimes literally loaning money when an employee needed a helping hand. No one would know, but he'd help you out. I learned a lot about Granddad while I was working at the store. There's countless other stories that I'm sure that people could share, but they all point to a man who will be forever remembered by many. I'll end with a few thoughts from customers and staff that I've heard over the past few days. People said he was more than a good man. He was a great person. He was a good boss. He was a fair man, a kind man, a generous man. He was a fine man, a man of works. This is from a customer. He said, I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't his generosity that made the difference in our company surviving a tough time to still be here today. And that's actually a large contractor in our city that grew. And they would credit at one moment in time, Granddad was there, and we were able to offer them something. He was someone to be admired. Another said his essence was the simplicity of his honest business dealings coupled with a strong work ethic. And that's been shared many times. Strong work ethic was key. He valued his family, team, and community. You know, I can still picture Granddad sitting back in his chair, looking out the window, past the computer screen, past the piles of paperwork on his desk. I think they were organized, but there was always piles. By some measure, the last few years, you think his contributions to the company could seem small. But his contributions go so much further than any one person would ever know. It really is the collection of countless moments and investments that tell his story. I've heard it said that your legacy isn't found in your lifetime, but it's in your lifeline. Granddad's legacy lives in the lives that he helped to build. Family, company, community, and we will forever be grateful.
Oops. Mask and glasses don't work good together if I can't see without my glasses. This, we asked, we wanted to give you a good representation of Dad, and which I felt we've done so far from the children and grandchildren community, but we also asked a friend to send along their notes. They weren't quite comfortable coming out, but anyway, this is a friend's notes. Ed Baker, so he was invited to take part. So he says, my memories with John and his family are dear to my heart and will always be treasured. I first met John when he had his business in the Blackburn building, which is down the corner of Sackville. Some of you remember Sackville Drive and Cobbock Road, where I think it's called Neighborhood Auto, right next door to that. Before he bought a property further up Sackville Drive, which is where we are here, and became a member of the Home Hardware family. My wife Kathy got to know Shirley, that's my mom, John's wife, when she visited Kathy's hairdressing salon in Sunnyside Mall. They soon became fast friends. Kathy and I bought property in Bedford, and soon after, John, Shirley, and family moved nearby. And we were all immediately good friends and neighbors. We became very close and were there for each other. On one occasion, a family member walked through a patio door and was badly cut. When I returned back from the hospital, several hours later, John had been to his store and returned with a sheet of plywood and secured the house. John and Shirley would have not leave Kathy until I returned. Another time we had a house fire while John and Shirley were away on a trip. They called to insist we stay in their house until we could get accommodations. John was like a brother and always had my back. We could discuss business, travel, or politics and respect each other's point of view. We took family vacations together, once to Newfoundland, and set up John's trailer in my uncle's garden. In the morning, there were bear prints on the hood of John's car and moose tracks in the garden. Fresh salmon from the bay and potatoes from the garden sitting around the campfire makes a trip unforgettable. And that just reminds me when he said that. I remember one time we were there, I think, mentioned 5 Islands. We had just bought a trailer, and Dad was always busy, obviously, building company businesses. And anyway, we were driving through 5 Islands in the provincial park there, and couldn't find our lot or site. So somebody pointed, "Oh, it's down there, Dad." So he pulls off the road, bumps along down to the campsite. I mean, I think he tore something off this brand new trailer, but that wouldn't bother Dad any, because he just, "No, well, there's a site set up." I don't think we could use a toilet after that, but anyway. Trips to PEI and Old Orchard Beach in Maine all helped to make our life an adventure. Whenever Shirley's family came to visit, Joyce, Bernard, Eugene, we always were invited to the kitchen party. Lots of stories, good food, and tales of times gone by. John was truly a people person. He enjoyed his business and greeting customers, new and old. He was quick to serve or help with advice. He loved and was proud of his family. Not long ago, Larry drove John down to visit us at our little farm in Bridgewater, where we now live. While there, he spoke of Elizabeth and how proud he was of her and Bob, and proud of the wonderful job they had done with the Bishopville Payzant family homestead. They were playing that song, "You Saw That Burn." Well, you wouldn't recognize it now. It's totally renovated. It's great. They had created a sanctuary that they all enjoy. He was proud of Shirley and enjoyed driving her to her public speaking engagements. Since Shirley's passing, John has kept in touch with sending Christmas cards and phone calls, and of course, visits. A few years back, I was working on a project building a horse shelter. When my order arrived in the Payzant truck, who was driving but John himself? Not a surprise. And it has been an honor to have John as my friend and who had been like a brother to me. On behalf of my wife, Kathy, my entire family, we share in your loss and extend our deepest sorrows to the Payzant family. So that's from a friend. But I just want to give you a few thoughts. Family being one of the boys. I'm actually stuck right fair in the middle. I can't get any more in the middle. Jim was born in 51. Andrew in 61. I'm 56, right smack in the middle. So Dad started the business in 1964. But he went to work for Ted. But back in, he would never have come to Sackville if inflation wasn't so high in Windsor back in the 50s, when his rent went, I think, to $56 a month, and he's only making $18 a week. So he said, well, that wasn't going to work, because to feed Jim still couldn't feed Jim at $12 a month. So he was working for, at that point, somebody in the dry cleaning store. He was at a furniture store in Windsor, worked for 2 ladies. It reminded me of the Waltons. 2 ladies, and he said he was the only employee. He would sell the furniture, deliver the furniture, do everything with his furniture. He was the only employee. So, and then he got a couple more dollars. Like I say, Jim was born, so he got a couple more dollars to go to a dry cleaner store. And lo and behold, he got home he was home. And a guy came knocking at the door, an old furniture salesperson who had sold him furniture at the furniture store and knew he was now working for the dry cleaners. And he said to Dad, there's a guy down in Sackville. He's looking to, he needs somebody. He sells furniture. It's a shopping center in Sackville. So Dad and Mom went down. It was a full day's drive back then, 50s, and came down. And you probably, there's all kinds of articles around about that. But anyway, this one, and he took the job. It's $50 a week. So working for Ted. But while they were in Windsor, how Mom and Dad met is a neat little story. Because Dad never wanted to leave the farm. He tried everything. He had a couple failed businesses actually. One he tried to, and like this is in the 40s, he tried to make candy for a while. That never worked. And then he tried canning, like actually canning peaches and strawberries and different things like that. And well, I was in the hospital with him one time, and we were having this little story. So he's going back many years, and he said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, Dad, what happened to that?" He says, "Well, he almost wore his mother out. She was doing the cooking, she's doing the canning, and I think he was out trying to sell it. So I almost wore her out." So he sold a couple of cases to Wade's down the valley, so that was it. So then he got the job down in Blackburns in Sackville. And Ted wasn't the easiest guy to work for. He was, a shopping center. So he had groceries, he had furniture, he had clothing, everything. But he owned it all. So Dad was working for Ted and was working all these different businesses. So, he was away a lot. He worked a lot because Dad said that Ted gave him the name, title, business manager. And of course, as was mentioned, Dad's a pretty humble guy. So Dad said, I don't think it really meant any much, just so they had to work for him quite a bit. So, and that's what he did. So at that point, Larry was born in 52. I came along in 56. And so anyway, in 1961, Dad would have been 31 and 5 kids. So, and Mom never drove. So she was home all the time raising the kids. But we hardly ever saw Dad because as, he treated customers like family. He wanted to serve them well. And it was just him. I mean, Ted was there, and a few others probably, but he worked a lot. So if we wanted to see Dad, we went to the store. And I remember one time I was probably in around 64, 65. I was probably, 8 years old, 9 years old, went down to the store because I wanted to see Dad. It was a Friday night, and he was working all the time, so I went down to see him. And jumped in I was helping one of the guys who had working there. He jumped in he was going making a delivery, so I jumped in and he says, "Well, did your Dad know?" "Oh yeah." I says, "Oh yeah, he knows I'm working." And the guy just smirked. He says, "Oh yeah, working, you're a big help to me." So anyway, we went off. And so the time went on, and he was just always working. Now I think about it though, because like I said, Dad never really wanted to leave the farm. And he had his brother up at the farm, and he had my Uncle Clyde set up in sawmill. And Clyde was a good worker, but he didn't really run the business side of it. Dad would work the business side of it. So Dad would, when he's going up there on Sundays, we'd go up there on Sundays, and Dad would be with Clyde with the lumber and also the concrete, which he had. And the way he got into concrete, Dad, let's say his health turned a little bit there last few weeks. And so I was in the hospital visiting him. And he said, he would get a little bit frustrated sometimes because he couldn't remember a lot of things, names and stuff. To me, it's phenomenally well. So anyway, he was 90 years old, and we were sitting in the hospital, and so he says, just the Saturday before he passed, he said, I always wanted to do interviews with him. So I said, okay, let's do a little interview. So he reiterated this story, how we got into the concrete. Because Ted, I don't know if you remember, Robert Stanfield's a premier back in '56, I think. So anyway, Ted had gone to Robert Stanfield and said, he was a premier and he was conservative and Ted was conservative. So he said, and Robert Stanfield was going to do all this repair to all these roads around Nova Scotia. So Ted went and secured the concrete, the deal for all the concrete, because Ted worked a deal out with Shaw's in Lance. So, and Dad would, and like I said, this was just last month, Dad would tell me the freight rate and everything, 6.5 cents for metric, or for ton per kilometer. I said, well, Dad, your memory's pretty darn good. He says, well, yeah, I guess it's not too bad after all. But he, so anyway, but Dad's always business-minded, so he didn't figure that Shaw's could make enough concrete, and plus there's jobs all over the province, so down Hansport, Bishopville. He says, well, maybe we could do it ourselves. So he set Clyde up in the concrete place, and they started making all this concrete that they would ship all over the province, and the mill, the lumber for the lumber mill. So it's just all business. I remember one time Mom said that if she wanted to see Dad, she had to get in the truck. So she would come down and she would have her knitting or computer or books or something for a coat, because she'd like to kind of warm, jump in this truck and go up to see Larry some, and just have this time with Dad. But and as mentioned, there's stories all through this community. Any street. I remember as a kid bumping around there, and it was back in the 70s. They never paved the roads first; they were just dirt, and they would dig the foundation out with a bulldozer, I think. So there'd just be mud all. First lake was mud, was a muddy lake there for a few years back in the 70s. My brother, I think Jim said, with a delivery truck, we would have, usually behind every one of our delivery trucks would be a tow truck, because you would get stuck every time we go on delivery. But Dad really impressed us. My mom, she passed, yesterday would have been their 70th anniversary. And Mom, dear soul, and Dad loved her dearly. He would often he must have been torn. The more I think about it now, the amount of time he had spent at work, because Dad had a grade 9 education. Dad never, he said that he left school, but that's as high as it went. In Bishopville was grade 9. And he was such a driver and wanted to get out and work. And jobs were pretty limited back then. But there was no higher grade. And he learned back on the farm. He had a belief in God. His mother was my grandmother. She's almost, I call Andrew the mayor now, but she was probably the mayor back then. Boy, she had a big signboard out, all kinds of bread and muffins and everything she would make. But she loved God. And Dad, he accepted Christ as Savior. And he's in heaven. He was with Mom. He was with Mom on their 70th anniversary. She wanted so much to make their 50th. She didn't quite make it on the 50th. They weren't together on their 50th, but they were together on their 70th. But anyway, Dad, because I remember Dad, that was 20 years ago. Mom got the news. Mom had cancer, breast cancer. So Mom, the doctor said, okay, Shirley, looks to be about this length of time. And Dad said to her, they were down Point Pleasant Park looking, if I remember correctly. And Dad said, dear, 2 years, that's 2 years. But, he said, they don't really know. He said, there's going to be a lot of people gone before you are, and they don't even know it. So, it kind of says to me, we got to really seize every day, like really, really enjoy every day. And so anyway, but Dad carried on. Like at that point, we were all in the business. Elizabeth worked there for a while, and all 4 boys, but Dad never pushed it on us. Dad led by example, and he, like people have said, he never really. Somebody told me the other day, visiting, he said, and to Linda's point, he said, your father is a community guy. He says, your father kind of really supported the community. I said, yeah. And he says, you know what? He never ever told me. He said, but now he just made me feel like I should. And he did. He supported the community. He said, not the Dad, because Dad wouldn't do that. And us 4 boys, we all ended up in the business. I don't think he ever said to any of us, well, you should join the business. He wanted us to, because he loved family. But he wanted us to be all that we wanted to be. So anyway, Mom passed. And didn't Dad really, because we were kind of, Andrew was kind of running the business then. We were all there working, so Dad could relax a little bit. Didn't he really pick up on the family end of things? Like Christmases, all these things, and as his children and grandchildren, that's a testimony. The love they had for him and the love he had for them. And he kept going with all our family events. It was fabulous, because that's what he loved to do. And then his moved forward to about, a couple years ago, his dad's health started to fail a little bit. And we all thought, because Dad was never in the hospital. Never even, barely went to see the doctor. So we thought, his surgery, cancer. So we thought, how's he going to handle that? What are we going to do? But just a trooper, he went in the hospital, had that surgery, come back. I don't think, of course, he never did retire. He still went back to the office within a few days of getting home, worked. Just back in there, because that's where he really loved to be. So a few weeks ago, he had a fall, bad fall, a couple months ago in November. And had a bad fall, broke his shoulder. Well, he was 90, so his mobility was a little bit restricted. So he broke his shoulder, and it kind of immobilized him a little bit. And he ended up in the hospital. Well, even then we thought, okay, Dad's in the, he's in the hospital, and it's not looking that good. So the last 3 weeks of his life, my sister and her brothers, 24/7 with Dad. And what an amazing time. What an amazing time he had. He never complained. Dad, he was just always on the go. And he couldn't sleep at night very well. Like, he was up and down when he was home. So he got in the hospital, and his biggest thing was that he couldn't get around on his own, so he needed to be assisted. Of course, nurses are all busy and stuff. They wanted to be in bed at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. And Dad, that really made him a little bit nervous that he would have to be in bed that long. So he worked it out with the nurses. So he says, okay, we pushed it to 9 o'clock. And he was all right with that, because he just did not want to complain. Dad did not complain. But did we ever have an awesome time with Dad those last 3 weeks with him? He just lived. He just lived the Bible. Like, he lived it. A lot of people can talk it. I'm not saying we don't judge anybody, but he lived it, like perseverance, love, joy, peace, patience. All those things, that was Dad. And he just showed it while we were in there in the hospital. And we would be in there, and there would be nurses come in. Like Sarah read that poem that Catherine wrote. She only knew Dad less than a year, and she wrote that. And we had nurses come in to his hospital room Well, they said, well, we're not his nurse today, but we just wanted to see how he was doing. Or we wanted to say hi to him. And they would, really, they would talk to him. And Larry says one nurse came in, just wept when he started to fail a little bit. So that just shows his character. So I really wanted you to get to know who Dad was. This is all about Dad, and we loved him dearly. And we hope that we've shown you, and we know you've loved him. You're here, and others that can't be here, they're online. So we really do appreciate that as a family. We were glad that we could share our dad with you, and we are very thankful. And we believe without a doubt that Mom and Dad are now reunited. They say he's accepted Jesus as a Savior, believes the Bible. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. And he lived it, he showed us it, and us and his grandchildren and great-grandchildren have given that testimony. So we really appreciate that, appreciate you coming out today. And I know he loved you all. He was just a man of love. Thanks very much.
That's awesome. Thank you all so much. Well, we heard a lot of common themes today. Heard a lot about legacy, heard a lot about building, heard a lot about community, and now we ended with what Jeff had mentioned. He was also a believer, a builder and a believer. And when I think of legacy, there's nothing greater that we could leave behind for our families and live in other than faith. Faith is the thing that takes us from this life into the next. And all the things that were mentioned by the family, I mean, just such a interesting how timelines seem to work out. Interesting, even to be celebrating a birthday in a very unique way today, of marking an anniversary with this particular time in life, It's kind of neat sometimes how God sees fit to weave some of those things into our own stories. And so with that in mind and with that final thought, that's my encouragement to you today. I don't sell lumber anymore with the Payzants, but coming up today, if you saw the cross on there, I do talk about Jesus an awful lot. That should not be a surprise. Just like if you walk into Payzants, they will try to sell you something, I promise you, right? That's what they're there for. And so if we could be any conduit for you guys, and I know there's many great church families represented here. I know some people are here from Stone Ridge. I know some people are here from Nova Church, and some people here from this own church. If we could be any part of your journey of faith, we'd love to be able to do that with you, because that is the thing that lasts. That is the thing that takes us from this place to the next. I mentioned, that poem that I read about how I view Mr. Payzant as that bridge builder. He didn't have to do the things he did. He didn't have to, but that's what good men do. There's another good man. His name was Jesus. He built a bridge for us, a way for us to be with him in a place that will last forever. And it just comes by believing, just as Jeff had shared, that very famous verse, that God so loved the world that he gave his son for us, that whoever would believe, just like John believed, they would not perish, but they would have everlasting life. It's as simple as that. If we could help you in any way, if we could help you journey in any way, I know there's many of the family that could help you and talk to you about that. We'd love to participate with that, because that is a legacy worth preserving. Amen? That's a legacy worth keeping. And I didn't have a lot of time to spend with your mom. I was working there during that season, and I would catch glimpses of her. I spent much more time with you, I think, even planting flowers. Perhaps that was one of my springtime assignments. But I do know that faith is a big part of who the Payzants are as well. And so with that in mind, I'd like to just close us in prayer and again offer that as hopefully something you take advantage of, take us up on. If you'd like a conversation about faith, we'd love to do that. But with that in mind, let's just bow our heads before the Lord as we kind of close this time together in recognition of who Mr. Payzant was and is because of his faith. So, Father God, as we've done our best to honor a man that you have affected deeply, a man who believed in you, who confessed you as Lord and Savior and lived his life in ways that maybe he didn't overtly share his faith, maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but I was able to witness, Lord, so many times of the character that Jeff spoke of, so many times of how he showed us how to live as well, just as your word teaches us. So we thank you for that, and we speak a blessing upon these people, all that are watching online. We speak a blessing upon the family. We speak a blessing upon this community. May we continue to live in the example that Mr. Payzant has left for us. And may we all believe as he believed. May we all find that bridge from this life into the next, the way that you have made a way for us. And so we thank you for that. And with that in mind, I speak a blessing over you all. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift his face toward you and give you peace. In Jesus' name we declare it. Amen. Thank you so much for joining us again. Thank you, family, for allowing us to participate in this way. And it's been a great honor to us. Well, the Lord bless you all. Thank you so much.